Ruari Hignell and Robert Middleton, lead practitioners from our group, have a combined experience of 50 years working with children and young people with special educational needs. It's safe to say they have a wealth of experience, and in this episode we explore strategies for supporting behaviour in the home environment, helping your child in a crisis, and top tips for understanding what our children are trying to communicate. Remember to hit the like button, comment and subscribe, as it helps us to grow our channel and reach even more parents and carers. Thanks for joining us today, Rob and Rory. We're here today to talk about behaviour and how we can support our children and young people at home. So let's start right at the beginning. Can you tell me what is behaviour?
Behaviour. It's an interesting word, isn't it? Because I think it immediately has like negative connotations around the word behaviour. I think quite often people will automatically think of bad behaviour or misbehaviour. Mm-hmm. But behaviour is actually what we're doing right now. It's everything we do. Mm. It's everything we say. It's like how we respond to stuff that's happening around us.
Yeah.
It's observable. You can count it. You can see it. And I think that behaviour is learned apart from reflex. It's the only thing that's not learned. Is that right? Have I got everything there?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the other thing is there's a consequence for all behaviour. Every behaviour has a consequence, and a consequence is like behaviour can sometimes have a negative connotation. But
exactly.
They're not negative, they're not positive, they just are the same as behaviour.
That's it.
It's just a result of that behaviour.
Sometimes we like to change the word consequence for the word outcome.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So it kind of explains it a bit better.
Yeah. So bearing in mind that behaviour is everything, there are times when behaviour can feel concerning. It can feel difficult to manage. So when does behaviour become a concern? When would we be thinking about stepping in, or how we might change things?
We would identify a behaviour of concern, as we would call it, if it is harmful to the individual or to other people. And when we say harmful, we don't necessarily just mean physically harmful. It might be preventing someone from accessing something. It might result in someone being excluded from an opportunity. Okay. And ultimately, it's something that's going to impact on a young person or an adult's quality of life.
So it's become a barrier, so to speak. So if we're thinking about these behaviours, which might feel difficult, which might feel challenging, and perhaps thinking about them in terms of harmful, as you've just mentioned there, we might want to be thinking about how we can at home make our environment feel supportive and meaningful to try and help maybe prevent some of these behaviours occurring. Have you got any thoughts or ideas about how we can do this at home?
Yeah, of course. So we're talking here about, proactively meeting our children's unmet needs, trying to understand what their behaviour is telling us and how we can meet those. And Rory and I recently did a webinar together called Understanding Behaviour, the Language of Communication.
Oh, great. We'll probably be able to link that in the bio, because I bet you there's loads of information in there.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, there will be.
But we encourage parents in that to be the detective, okay, and start to figure out kind of what might be going on for my child. What are they trying to tell me? How can I meet these needs proactively so we don't get to the behaviour in the first place? And we use a framework to kind of talk through that. And the framework's called Capable Environments, which is essentially just a set of kind of standards, for want of a better word, or areas that we look at and we identify and we say, right, where are there areas for development? And we break it down into 9 areas. So we look at interaction, communication, there's choice, engagement, predictability, we have relationships, personal care, sensory needs, and we break these 9 areas down and we say kind of where are maybe the gaps and where can we offer a little bit more and be a little bit more supportive. And it might be that we get the support of occupational therapists, speech and language therapists and external professionals involved in this. But the idea is the evidence suggests that if we are able to kind of meet all these needs proactively through looking at each separate environment, then 80% of our children, their needs will be met. And actually, a lot of those behaviours that we do see as a communication, they're not there anymore.
Yeah,
because
it
it's
feels a
being
really significant number, that, doesn't it?
80%. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it sounds to me like it's a way of perhaps spotting any patterns and seeing if anything is coming up in any particular environment. And like you said, we can maybe stop it before we get there, or at least try and minimise it if we do get to that point in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant,
that.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So our parent questions are on our iPad. If you just bear with me a second, I'm going to fetch this so we can find a question from our parent. Our first question is going to be, how can we use our relationships and connections with our children to support their behaviour? Now, I know this is a huge area. This is absolutely massive and we could talk about it all day. So if you could just tell me, Ruari, where you'd start.
Yeah, so I'm going to attempt to answer this. And I think when I looked at that question, it made me think about rapport. Okay. So quite often we talk about building rapport with people or building rapport with our children. And I actually think that rapport can be used as a strategy. So I want to sort of talk about how we can use rapport. So it's not about building rapport with your child, because as a parent, you will already have a rapport with your child.
You'll have those relationships.
But it's actually going back to that and revisiting it and actually using it as a strategy. So first of all, I think the word rapport is often misunderstood. So just to clarify where that comes from. So it comes from the French word rapporter, which sort of translates as it's me delivering a message to you about something I've experienced. I think that's kind of how it translates. It's quite interesting, that, isn't it? So, but if we go back to it as a strategy with our children, it's about, first of all, being honest with our children. So being honest with our children about, being clear and direct with them about what our intentions are, and kind of what our feelings are as well. I think that's really, really important as a parent. And then the next part is like empathy. So the empathy part would be understanding your child's perspective and kind of trying to see the world through their eyes. And this might be involve like validating their feelings and naming their feelings as well. You might be feeling this, or I can see that you're upset about that. That
can be quite tricky sometimes, can't it, for the children to kind of recognise how their bodies are feeling. So supporting them with, I wonder if you're feeling like this, can be really helpful in the moment, can't it? Really, wondering aloud.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. And then the next one is autonomy. So this is empathising with your child's need to actually take control. I think sometimes it's okay to allow our children to take control.
They are little people with their own thoughts and feelings.
They are.
So
they are.
Bringing that in can be really helpful.
That's it. And also like helping them, propping them up, maybe holding their hands, but actually sometimes we need to allow them some autonomy in resolving these problems. And then I think the last part would be reflection. So this is identifying with your child, feeding things back to them, kind of acknowledging and kind of, I suppose, trying to guide your child to that sort of the goal so that they can meet that need, that unmet need, and perhaps help them to do that themselves. So it's important to allow our children to be in control as a part of that. And I think using rapport with our children is about maintaining respect and dignity and compassion with our child. And if we get that right, I think that that connection that you have with your child will actually be longer lasting and actually it can be used as quite a powerful strategy to revisit that. A lot of that I'm kind of, I hope I'm not waffling now around this.
I think it's brilliant. I love this message about rapport and those connections and relationships.
I mean, I've learned a lot of this over like the 20 years that I've been doing this work and working with children, but actually I've recently read a book. So I want to reference a book here because that's kind of really reinforced this for me. And I don't want to suggest that these are all my ideas. So, I've learned this from a book. So the book is called Rapport, funny enough, and it's by, I've got it written here just in case I forget. So it's Emily Allison and Lawrence Allison, and they're a married couple, but they're a pair of forensic psychologists. And the book is fantastic, and it really reinforces the use of rapport as a strategy in kind of reading people and working with people, whether that's adults or children.
It is such a huge area, isn't it? And we could talk about behaviour all day. So I really appreciate that you've kind of taken the time to think of that one area that parents can think about as their initial starting point and their initial focus. But it's a really lovely thought and idea, isn't it, that we kind of bring our children alongside us in that partnership, really think about them as individual people and think about that behaviour as that place to kind of, I suppose, support when the challenges arise.
That's right.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I've got another question, if that's all right with you guys. What strategies can parents use when their child is in crisis? I think this is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it is. I think probably with any question like this, we kind of have to preface it with a little bit of, there is no one blanket answer. There's no one size fits all. I'll try and sort of offer a few strategies and thoughts on this, but it's important to remember it's a toolbox really. So when we work with parents or with staff members who we work with in our day job, we talk about using a toolbox, and actually, it's up to the person who's working with that child and in that moment to choose the right tool for that job at that moment, really. I want to use an analogy. I haven't got any French words, so I'm not going to give you any language lessons.
We won't hold it against you.
and I also don't want to pass this analogy off as my own. This is, it comes from a guy called David Petoniak, and he did a piece of work, and it was called Into the Chaos of Things, or maybe I butchered that, something along those lines. David Petoniak. And he sets the scene of you're on a boat, so a big ocean liner, and you're in the middle of the Atlantic Sea, and there's a huge storm, and it's windy, and everybody's kind of out on deck, and they're trying to hold on. And all of a sudden, a big gust of wind comes, and one individual falls over, and they're in the water. Everyone rushes to the side to have a look, and then we see this person, and they are screaming, they're shouting, they're flailing. We can't really understand what they're saying. It's too loud. The boat's getting further away.
Very dramatic.
It's very dramatic. What we do know is they're terrified, and they need support. Okay, so picture that person who then gets the megaphone and shouts over, "Excuse me, you need to stop all that shouting and screaming. That is attention-seeking behaviour, and no one will be able to come and help you until you're calm." Okay, so hopefully I think people can follow where I'm going with the analogy. That often our children they're in crisis, they're terrified, they're in a situation where they're crying out for help.
And out of control.
Out of control, and that's where we are. And, probably the last thing we want to do is that kind of stop screaming, stop shouting. But it's the natural thing that we do as well. Often it's our instinct to do that, and I'm not going to help until you're calm. I'd love to know how many times that's actually worked. But we need to think about, well, what can we do? How can we support? So, I mean, first of all, we can be prepared for starters. Now, that is easy for us to say because this is our job, and we work with staff and we develop plans with them. We give staff training. We do this sort of thing. For a parent, that's a lot more difficult. Being prepared and having those plans in place, it's not necessarily always feasible or practical for them. So, I just want to kind of offer 3 or 4 strategies, I think, that just having your toolbox to think about and be mindful, really, more than anything else. Again, I'm not none of these are, you must do this or you shouldn't do this. It's about thinking what works for your child. But the first one I would say is, that's pretty universal, is if your child is in crisis, don't jump in. If someone's in the water, instinct might be, I've got to get in and I've got to help and I've got to do something quickly, and you go and jump in the water. Okay, and we've probably all heard of this when we hear about lifeguards and stuff like this and water safety and stuff like this. We don't jump in because actually we could end up with 2 casualties quite quickly and 2 people who are now out of control, who are now struggling, who now need support. So we only want to do one. We want to kind of not jump in.
Like kind of assess the scene, see what's going on,
assess
take
the
a
scene,
moment
see
first.
what's going on, and ensure everyone's safe.
Yeah.
Well, I say everybody's safe because obviously somebody's not safe, but we don't want other people to become unsafe as part of it. So that's where we start. Then the second thing you want to do is kind of, then once we've done that, we want to orientate ourselves a little bit. So we're thinking about a child in crisis, thinking about the environment, awareness of the environment. Yeah. What are the risks in the environment? Do we need to remove the risks? Are there people in and around the situation who maybe it's easier to remove rather than that person who is struggling and who does need support? So we manage our environment like that. And I think it's also important to think about escape routes. And what I mean by that is, I mean that physically and emotionally as well. So people need a way out, okay? And I think sometimes subconsciously, when we are trying to support somebody who is in crisis and then all of a sudden our fight or flight system kicks in and we start to kind of be quite reactive, we can end up inadvertently blocking escape routes, whether they're physically, whether they're emotional ones and ways out, and we're not necessarily realising we're doing it. So it's about kind of keeping that little bit of awareness of our effect on the situation. We think about things like choices, and if we're offering somebody a choice, is it an open choice or are we giving them 2 choices? Because our ability to process information when we are highly stressed is really compromised. So actually it's safer, easier to just give somebody 2 choices where they don't have to overthink too much about what it is they're going to do next. And then we have to just think about kind of our communication. And when we talk about communication, we are talking verbal, non-verbal, the language, the tone of our voice, the volume of our voice, all of these things. And again, there's no one size fits all. It's about what's right in that situation. And we learn from these things. And in terms of non-verbal, another key phrase I like to use is we want to appear calm, but I'm conscious not to use the word keep calm because keeping calm is really difficult when things are going hectic around us. But appearing calm, it's a skill and we can learn it and we can practice it. And I think of that swan going up the river, swimming against the water, and underneath they're going like the clappers and the legs are going, but actually on top they just look so serene and chilled, and like they do this every day. And that's how, if we're appearing like this, actually other people are going to feed off us.
There are things that we can put in our own toolkit for that though, aren't there? Like thinking about just breathing.
100%.
You know, being just a little bit mindful. And mindful doesn't mean sitting down and meditating or whatever, but just checking in with yourself in the moment.
Yep.
You know, maybe a little acknowledgement to somebody else who's in the room that that might be the time that they need to step in and you need to kind of take a moment.
That's a recognition of where we're at ourselves.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this actually recently, and it can be sometimes little things. If I sit down and I have my hands, you know, less than you can look calm just sometimes just by your body language, leaning against the wall. You know, it's very non-threatening. One thing sometimes people can do when they tense up is automatically our fists get tighter, our shoulders go up, and all of a sudden it starts to look like a confrontation from somebody looking on the outside. And that's not what we're intending to do. Obviously, we're just nervous or worried ourselves. So it's about appearing calm, and people tend to follow that. So I think that's really important. And then I think, you know, by doing all of these things and using your toolbox, the idea is to bring somebody kind of down from that ledge or bring them out of the water, if we're going back to the analogy. And then when we reach dry land, as I said, that's when we do the work, and that's when we look back and we say, right, I mean, we can move into that if you want to talk about that, because that's really, we're starting to talk about recovery then and stuff that happens after a crisis situation. I don't know, is there anything you... I've talked for a long time there.
When we spoke about this, we did liken it to being an actor. You know, when you're managing situations, whether you're a parent, carer, or a teacher, an educator, it's about just reminding yourself that you're an actor, you're on stage, you just need to remember your lines, you know, and when you describe like trying to appear calm.
It is about acting and it is about that.
Yeah.
But you don't want to become impersonal. No. Because actually it is still about empathy, it is about rapport, you know, and I think kids are some of the best in the world at picking up on and when someone is not genuine, you know, so it's got to come from a genuine place as well, but you also have to be in control of.
Well, you spoke about like capitulation, so that makes me think about, you know, like adapting your style, your parenting style to a situation. And I think that's where the acting comes in, because it might feel unnatural, you know, you might be feeling anxious or cross, you know, or upset.
There may be other people watching that make you feel under pressure as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of manage that. And I think it's okay to, like we talked about capitulating, you know, like that might be like standing back and allowing something to happen, or, you know, as a bit of an emergency response to a situation rather than trying to control it. Because that might be another style that you might need to adopt. You know, can you think of situations where as a parent you need to take control? It might be a situation where your child's doing something unsafe. You're not going to allow them to get hurt. So that's where you would maybe adopt a more controlling parenting style, or maybe a more collaborative style. And I think that's trying to work with your child together to try and identify what the problem is and maybe find a solution together. Yeah. And then maybe another style might be more challenging, confronting. Do we have to challenge our children sometimes? I think we do, don't we?
Yeah, I would say,
We might need to confront, but it's about having those...
It's about how we do that.
Yeah.
And it's about the work we do around it.
Yeah, so it's about being flexible with those different styles and adapting them, and then... In
isolation, being challenging, being confrontational, that's one thing. But if we're doing it in the context of learning a new skill, and kind of... And doing it from a place of rapport, from a place of relationship. If we're doing it from those places and there's a wider understanding as to why we're challenging, why we're possibly confronting, for probably maybe not the best phrases in this context, but yeah, you know, it's about boundaries, and actually children thrive. We spoke about this in the webinar that we did as well. Yeah. That having boundaries and having a clear set of what's the expectations of me, we all need that. That's part of predictability. It's part of those capable environments.
We do.
Yeah. It's a huge topic, behaviour, and I really appreciate you taking time today to dive into it and give us those little nuggets of support. But we will, I'm pretty sure, link to the webinar, which is full of advice and support. But we like to end our podcast with a section called Words of Wisdom. Rory, can you tell me what your words of wisdom are, please?
I'm going to quote Dr. Ross Greene, and he says that children will do well if they can. And that's from a book that I can recommend called The Explosive Child. And he believes that children are motivated to do well, but sometimes they just don't know how to do it. So it's about teaching them and collaboratively working with them to solve a problem.
Brilliant, thank you. And Rob, what are your thoughts?
I guess mine are around being kind, and that's to, you know, with an incident that's finished, for example, and somebody's come back, they're back on dry land. Are we checking in with them? Are they safe? Are they well? Are their basic needs met? Are they warm? Are they hungry? These sort of things, you know. It's just that those acts of kindness to start building that rapport straight away. But I think leading on from that, probably even more important, possibly, being kind to yourself. You know, being kind to yourself, understanding sometimes we get things wrong. that's okay as well. We're not always going to get it right. And I guess kind of looking after yourself. There's a couple of quotes I would think of it. You can't pour from an empty cup. And
so true.
It's so true. And you can't meet the needs of a person without your own needs kind of being met first, if that makes sense. And I think it's important. Yeah. That's
Oh, thanks so much for joining us today and for all of that advice and information that you've given us. And hopefully we'll be able to touch base again another time soon. Thank you.
Thank you.